teams. Like, okay, if you're the two, the two for everybody's the intel officer. It's the shop where intel happens, and so the two has got a job where they're usually looking up. Like, hey, I've got to talk to the boss. I got to be ready for this general's briefing. I got to sit in on these other ordinate or subordinate elements in their briefings, and so I'm just going to be kind of like the spokesman for everything intel, so that when someone has a question, hopefully I've got a pretty decent answer, right? Like that's one of the ways to do that job. Another way is to enable everybody around you to be great. But you have to know so much about intel to direct each person and be like, hey, I need you to get this part of the shop whipped into shape so that you can do this briefing. And I'm just going to run the motherfucker of a two shop, right? It's challenging. And then you have these field teams that you largely have no control over.
Well, I was on the field team.
Yeah.
So
you were on the field team. Okay.
Yeah, I was a platoon leader, which was exceedingly rare for, like usually it's like a 4-man team. We had 12. So they actually had platoon leaders for the Battlefield Surveillance Brigade. So I lucked out on that, but yeah, dude, I still had to manage up, right? I had to manage my company commander. I had to manage to the S2 that was actually taking the intel. Like, dude, I don't know. I fucking hate the Army.
Well, so here's the other thing about all of this, right? So if you're on a team, that the commander really doesn't know what you guys need in terms of leadership. They don't know, like, they think they do. And this is just me saying this because I worked with a lot of commanders, but they just don't have the first clue how to drive that thing. Like if you put if they're a tanker and you put tanks in front of them, oh man, they're gonna do fine with that, right? They know how to work that machine. But you give them a counterintelligence team, they just don't know. And so they're gonna do what their best thing is. And really, if you on the intel side, and you get this at the team level, if you don't ingratiate yourself to all of the units on that camp within reason, and if you don't become a vital piece of information for the commander, you're always behind. You're always going to be secondary or tertiary in terms of the impact. And the commander's going to always know more than you because you can't reliably get in front of them and you haven't earned the right to give them bad news.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't get any work, right? If you're just the people that are like, oh, hey, that's the intel people. Like they sit over there and watch movies and shit. Whereas I was like, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to talk to the unit commanders. I'm going to get you guys on conf. The guy I took over for was like the hands off, let your NCOs cook. But the problem is that a lot of the NCOs came over from like ADA and all these other places that they didn't really care about. And the problem that we ran into is they didn't have any structure. So I came in, I put structure around it, was like, you guys are going to fucking work. Like you guys are in the Army. There's nothing worse than spending a year in Iraq and watching fucking movies all day.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And the intel job, like if you gave me two dudes, and by say dudes, whatever, I don't care about that, and some interpreters, I'll outperform an entire company in terms of getting stuff. But we're going to work 16 to 20, sometimes 36 hours a day. If Lieutenant Lerette came up to me and said, hey, Pete, we're going to go on a mission. Yep, let's go. But you just came back from a mission. Yep, let's go. That's my job, is to get the way I did it. My job was to get off the camp as often as possible while still maintaining relevance on the camp, because it's possible to go full Lawrence of Arabia. And when you show up to the command, you're like, hi, I have incredible news. And they're like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
You can't do that either.
Are we actually going right now, or are we just bullshitting?
Yeah, we're going. We're
All right.
We're rocking the house. Yeah. That's why I want to talk about the intel thing, because it's interesting. We don't get to talk about, especially like collector to team leader, collector style guy. This doesn't happen very often, right? And I'm trying to get people to understand that intel is such a weird thing, and we're out shopping. Like you might have an area brief and maybe it has everything wrong to what you're doing. So you read that and you're like, I don't know, is this relevant? And you get out there and you're like, none of this matters to what my commander wants, So you're always trying to sort through. It's entrepreneurial. And if you aren't out there every day, right?
So I'll tell you my story. We went over to Iraq. I was at Cop Cash, and we were pumping out intel. All that intel went to like Chelsea Manning, that ended up sending it out to WikiLeaks or whatever it was. So when the WikiLeaks thing came out, they were like, don't go on WikiLeaks and look. And I was like, I don't have to. I have it all right here. Like, literally, we're just sending it to Chelsea or whatever the hell his name was back then.
Right.
And then we had an underperforming lieutenant at literally the best intel spot in Baghdad, right? This is where they had all the high value targets. This is where Saddam Hussein's like deck of cards was. And this kid went up there, and dude, we made fun of him that he was like Castaway, like he was Tom Hanks. Literally would like not leave his room. He'd grab like 7 Otis Spunkmeyer muffins and not leave his room for like 2 to 3 days. So my commander was like, just Morgan, go up there and unfuck this team. And as an officer, you get to a point where like you get your platoon time, and then they want to move you into your next key development stuff.
Right.
But they knew I was going to get out. So my commander was like, let Morgan go unfuck this team. I go up to JSS Justice. And not only does it's got an SF team, it's got a field artillery team that was doing like pseudo combat operations. This is 09, so everything was winding down. And I was like, hey, you guys, like the NCOs. So I was like, hey, you guys have like 48 hours to show me what you do here. And then at the end of that 48 hours, you tell me if you think you're being effective or not. Dude, it took like 24 hours, and they pulled me into like one of their chews and was like, we're all fucked up, aren't we? And I was like, yeah, you guys are all fucked up. And it's not your fault. Like your last lieutenant was literally hanging out in an air-conditioned room instead of like directing you guys what to do. So I set it up to where we would have a morning meeting, and I would say, look, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday or whatever it was, you guys are going to go over to the detention facility and just hit them up. Just go say hi to those dudes, right? Because we did SIGINT, we did HUMINT, we did counterintelligence.
Okay.
So if you go over to the detention facility, that gives you access to all the evidence. The evidence is cell phones. The cell phones we do all the SIGINT on. We take all the data off of it. We send it up. So it was really not that the people were bad. It was that the leadership was wrong. And being able to come in the morning and say, what are you doing today? And then, you know, your afternoons are for your reports. And then in the evening, we do another touch base. And we say, what are we going to do in the next 24 hours? And then you set 24, 48, 72. And you change it if you have to every evening. Sure. So they went from being like nothing burgers to the highest performing intelligence team in Baghdad. And we hit like the number 2 HVT in Baghdad while we were there. We were able to get the intel on that. But it just got to a point where like the SF guys will go out on missions and they come back and say, oh, you guys do all that exploitation shit. And they come over with just cell phones and computers and you name it. And some of the shit on those computers that you got from the Iraqis, dude, it was gnarly stuff, man. It was like, because dude, the GIs would leave and they would hand their computer off to like the interpreter that they really like. So you're going through it, and next thing you know, there's like, you know, just some girl's beaver and they're just staring right at your face. And it's not the stuff you see on Playboy, I'll tell you that. But so if you have a computer and you're going to give it to somebody, don't, because we were finding stuff that had been deleted like 3, 4, 5 years earlier, emails, you name it, dude. I could pull everything off of those computers. With the equipment that we had, and we didn't have the best
20
stuff.
years ago.
Yeah, exactly. 20 years ago, dude. I gave them one of my old computers because we were just training with it, and they were pulling up emails from when I worked for Blackwater, which was 04, so this was 09. And they were pulling stuff from 5 years prior, literal like emails, like, and I was like, oh shit, I remember I sent that to Rex on like around this time frame, and they pull it up, and I'd be like, oh, you guys are getting the inside scoop on what your LT used to do for a living.
Yeah. So by the way, Cop Cash, been there, and actually until somewhat recently, and really like within the last maybe 5 years, I remembered 100% how to walk around most of that camp at night without any red light. I knew the number of steps, left turn, right turn, around the back of the tent, you know, out to the shitter and everything. I knew every single, because when you're there long enough, maybe you don't roll this way, but I need to know how many steps this is, because if we have to do something, I need to know where I'm at. It's dark. I may not have my flashlight. And so I would just memorize the steps it took on a given, because they had those plasticky kind of walkways. Do you remember this at all?
Yeah. And then they had the big berms that surrounded the old nuclear plant. I would run up those. Yeah.
Yeah, the $1 million staircase, right? Yeah, so we were there at the same time, and also there was an interpreter named Brock, by the way, who was there at the same time, and he was a young Iraqi kid who's now becoming an American doctor. How amazing is that? I don't know if you knew that or not, but
No, that's
if you
awesome.
happen to remember Brock, yeah, and then Scott Husing's interpreter, Big Sam, he was also at Cop Cash at that time.
No shit.
So
I just remember they were like, "Don't worry, there's all this nuclear stuff here, but you're gonna be fine. Just don't point your
it's
penis
okay.
towards the reactor." And I was like, "Dude, I don't want to have kids," so I was up there just sunning my wang close to the reactor as much as I could. Of course, I have kids, but
yeah. Well, they're not normal though. And the other thing that was funny about that area, they called it Jizzer Diala, like it was from Texas. Jizzer Diala. Like
so Diala was I rescued a dog from Cop Cash. So they had all these puppies, right? And I was like, I'm gonna rescue one of these things because, dude, I've been in Iraq for 3 years at that point, and I was like, I want to do something. I want to feel like I did something good. So we rescued this dog, named her Diala, but she was just eating like hot dogs and stuff for like the first 6 weeks of her life. And then the day before, I got the guys to come down and get the dog through ASPCAI. So they took the dogs and they took them off the base. And I looked over, there was like the Ugandans that would like clean up the base and stuff. And I was like, "Where's my dog?" And they're like, "Oh, we had to go take it to the base." I don't know if that's how they sounded, but I was like, "Go find my dog. It's got like a little brown spot, like right over its eyebrow, kind of down to its nose." So they went out there, grabbed my dog, came back, and I got her to the States. They just had to put her down. My mom had her just put her down like 4 or 5 months ago, dude. But she lived for fucking ever. And the worst dog ever. Worst dog. Because, dude, you were around those dogs. Like, they would bark at anything. It's a survival thing. So, you're sitting there in 3 rooms away and you fart and she's over there barking. And, oh, dude, she was mean as shit, too, dude. If you were in her inner circle, sweetest dog ever. But, like, some guy walks up, she'd be like, "No, I'm going to bite you." I'm like, dude, she was just mean.
Yeah, one of the most interesting pieces of intel that I cracked was, so this is for folks who don't know, you probably know this already, but you drive around Baghdad area where we were at, this is kind of off in the country, but there's still a lot of like civilization out there. And there would be these piles of construction sand, maybe like 4 feet high and maybe about 10 feet wide, and just like in a dome. Like just imagine a bunch of sand dumped from a bucket. And it would have like these holes through it, like Swiss cheese almost. And we'd all look and be like, "What the fuck is causing that? Like, what is it about this thing?" And then I did my job. I talked to the locals, like, "Oh, the dogs do that. Yeah, they do that to hide during the day because they want to have shade." I'm like, "Oh, that's the simplest answer ever." Never knew that though, And so, and the commander was like, he one day questioned out loud, "Why all those? It's not bombs. We know that now. What?" And then I was able to go, "Oh, sir, that's just the dogs." And then he thought that was the thing, like one of the things that was the thing that made him go, "Pete is a guy that has information. He has answers." And it's just the dumbest thing, but everybody who ever asked that question after that might go, "Yeah, talk to the Iraqis about that. That's the local dogs." And then sure enough, you start to see the dogs if you ran at the right time of day. Because a lot of times we didn't roll at the middle of the day because it's fucking hot,
Yeah.
All right, so that's a lot about Intel. Unless you have anything else you want to say about Intel in general. And by the way, happy coincidence that we were in the same area, probably at the same time. But is there anything else you want to say about that time?
No, I used to tell my soldiers, you're looking for a D-, man. If you're right 60% of the time, that's a D-. You're not going to get through college with that thing, but like that's what you're aiming for. Just get to a D-. And I think, being prior enlisted, that helped a lot. Like I would come in and being prior Blackwater, they're like, "Okay, if something happens, this guy's going to be all right." But yeah, dude, it was really, because by the time I got there in 2009, you could just tell that nobody really cared that much. Most of the infantry units were leaving in early 2010, and that's the frustration, is you can go over there, and the funniest part about Intel or anything is you think the unit before you is all fucked up, right? You're like, "Oh, I could do this better. We're going to change this up." And then the unit that takes over for you thinks you're all fucked up, because by the time you're there for a year, dude, you're just tired. You're complacent. And they're looking at you like, "Oh, well, why didn't you do it this way or that way?" And it's almost to a point where you're like, "Yeah, we tried all that, believe me." And so did the unit before us and the unit before that. And
Yeah.
dude, it was just, I mean, I felt like at one point I was just making PowerPoints showing what intel we got so that it could go up to the
Yeah.
brigade commander, and then the brigade commander would be like, that was very good, thank you. I'm like, dude, it just, I don't know, man. It's a hard way. You want to talk about bureaucracy and all the stuff that you're hearing that's coming out.
Yeah.
You get into, if you've spent time in the military, especially like intel, the amount of time you take to do something to get up to a brigade commander, and it gets chopped out by 90% by the time it gets to him, and there's no feedback loop. You're just, it's little wonder that we're having a problem winning wars. I'll tell you that.
Or administrating things, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make the administration so like right now there is a lot of reaping of the fat, right? That's there, but that fat is replaced quite often with fat. And so, like right now, you know, let me just say this: like the lieutenant who did your job, 3 lieutenants before you and 3 lieutenants after you. One of the things I learned was to go and grab all of your slides that were the same slide, and go, "Hey, let's do whatever you want, man." You know, and he had to say this to the majors because the captains didn't get it. I didn't mind the captain being there, but I needed the major to hear what I'm saying. Like, we'll do whatever you guys want to do. I'm going to help you guys, whatever it is. But let's just understand there's 8 of these slides from the last 7 years. What are we going to do different? You know? And that got the major to be like, yeah, fuck, Jesus Christ, you're right. Like, I remember being a lieutenant and running around, you know, wherever it was, right? Because we'd done the same thing over and over again and had total amnesia about it. Even if we had done it ourselves, we thought, no, I know it's a good idea. It's the whatever, the pull lever B, you know, and that's the same thing that happens when we get these things, and very much like combat, the altruism, the belief of like, hey, if we go out, we can educate these kids, or let's make sure we protect the kids. Let's not exploit them in some way. And it turns out, and this references the article that you're publishing, you end up harming kids at a rate that would shock you if you bothered to look at the damage you were causing. If you cannot see that damage, then you are a monster who can't even understand. Like, look, we're going to fuck with kids. We're going to fuck with other people's women. It's on us to understand how fucked up we are in doing that. And if we don't start there, then you shouldn't fuck with other people's women or kids.
Yeah. No, dude. I tell everybody, going on a 1-year deployment's like going into a worm tunnel. It's like the Marvel movies where they take a piece of paper, they fold it over, they stick a pencil through it. Dude, that, like, literally that piece of paper is your deployment. And the first 3 months you want to go over there and help everybody. The second 3 months you're like, okay, now I'm getting really good at this. The third 3 months you're like, okay, now I'm getting tired. And the fourth 3 months you're like, dude, fuck it, I'm fucking done. Yeah. And then the new unit comes in, and they're like, okay, and they're at quarter 1, right? They're ready to rock and roll. So
yeah. Well, and I stayed because of the way my work life worked, and so I got to see them rotate over the top of me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys, like, they're not fucked up. Those guys weren't fucked up. You guys didn't take their hand off. I was there. You didn't even see me. Like, I would become invisible, Morgan, right? So the commander would be like, wherever I go, you can go. You direct my PSD, we'll go wherever you want to go. This is my unit, is your unit. You're a number 1 force multiplier. I need more from you. How do I help you? Right? That's where I would end up about 3 months in. And we would speed up the process just a little bit. And then the next guy would come in, and it took me iterations and iterations learning how to build all this together. So, like, you know, where the commander's like, hey, commander next, listen, this is Pete. He's fucking incredible. You have to listen to what he says. And they're like, yeah, I got it. We're not going to drop the ball. Next thing they do is they're like, look at this football. Boom.
Oh, yeah.
Just throw it on the ground. And I'm like, slow down, man. Slow down. But get more things right. Do fewer things. Get out of your own way. Don't be the problem. You know, that was like my main mantra for a lot of these guys. And that didn't work.
It never does, dude.
You can't tell an 05 that who runs the thing. I'm like, you're the boss. We're going to do what you know. I had to figure out the language, and I didn't figure it out until I myself, after years and years and years, was like, I don't need to spend my life slowing down so that high charging, fast paced people can maybe catch up to me for a couple of months, you know. And it's not that I was great. I just had a lot of experience in what we did wrong, and I could focus my collection. I could predict the future. And so again, I'm going to get us back to this government thing. So when Donald Trump and his crew are like, hey, we're going to go into USAID, by the way, not USAID, USAID is how everybody says it. Of course it's going to be fucked up. Every time I saw those guys in the battlefield, they were fucked up, and they would shake no, we're not messed up. It's just really hard here, you know.
Dude, I protected those guys at Blackwater, and I can tell you that their heart was always in the right spot.
Right.
But the feeder to USAID are like schools like I went to, like Tufts University and Harvard and all these places where they are do-gooders at heart, but they don't understand like how things work on the ground. A lot of these, like, dude, almost every kid I went there that wasn't prior military is like, oh yeah, I went to Brown for my undergrad and my parents paid. Like they come from a very privileged view of the world, and they think the best of people. Whereas when you grow up white trash like I am, you think the worst of everybody. You're like, everybody's out to get me. So
yeah,
we would be having conversations about, you know, let's just say Somalia, and they'd be like, well, what they need is they need plumbing and they need all these creature comforts. And I'd be like, maybe they need security first, because if somebody comes in and chops your arm off, you still can't wipe your ass if you have a nice toilet. Now, here's the funny thing is that we did an exercise where everybody sat around a table and everybody was like the head of something, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of State, you name it. And they go through a scenario. And by the end of the scenario, the person's just like slowly pushing the button forward. And everybody at that table, except for me, the military guy who's Department of Energy, is like, we need to shoot bombs into mainland China. And I was like, whoa, like at some point, all those like pacifists and do-gooders are like, okay, you know what's the answer is all out war. And that's why I think you see, it doesn't matter what the administration is. You see like war hawks always come out, and it doesn't matter. Now it's in Ukraine, right? The Democrats are saying Ukraine, more people, more ammunition. And the guys that have been on the ground are like, that, no, that's just more death. And that's what you should try to avoid. But as long as it's not their death, right? As long as you're not putting boots on the ground, which is a hell of a segue into what we'll talk about with using PMCs to move children. But as long as you're not putting those boots on the ground, it's politically advantageous for you to be like, more war. And it's pretty disturbing. You can usually tell that nobody's experienced it at that table.
I had the recently disgraced Tim Kennedy on my show, you know, but before the attack on the Israelis, right? And I was saying, like, we don't care about the Houthis. We don't care about Yemen. Like, we don't care about that at all, right? And now all of a sudden, and again, a lot of these people you're talking about are like, bomb those fuckers. Like, why? Because my food costs more money because it can't go through the Suez Canal. Like, is that what we're doing? Are we? And look, I'm all for lethal force when necessary. I know you are too. But is the answer to go fuck those people up? Is because you don't shipping costs more, or did someone else fuck up? And by the way, whoever's in charge of that part of the American institution, why aren't they in jail? You know, how did all these generals get out like we won?
Well, like, I'll tell you,
high-end jobs, you know? Yes.
The answer is not the carrot, and the answer is not the stick. It's somewhere. It's essentially letting the donkey go where it wants to, right? Because we've tried it. We've tried it with Somalia, Yemen, you name it, where we flood these guys with money, and then they still. And then we've tried the other thing where Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria, where we go in with the stick and we just start hammering people. And that doesn't work because everybody wants manifest destination. Everybody wants to be able to say, this is my country. This is where it needs to go. And instead of us just taking a step back and saying, hey, why don't you guys figure this out for a bit and then we can start helping you? We're like, don't worry. We got you at the very beginning. So,
yeah. It's real cagey. It's smart because one of the things that and again, this took me a long time to figure out. I mean, this very, very hard path to get there. But I'm in Afghanistan. I'm talking to this very wise elder he was a Mujahideen commander in this past. He was a holy man who, you know, people around him came to him for. I don't want to say he was like the chaplain, but he was like a chaplain kind of guy. And then he was a governor. And I'm like, everybody thinks this guy is inept, but I would say to him, like, why aren't you in like the state capital instead of out here in the province where all of the people are? And he's like, well, you understand, Pete, that our government is structured so that the primary place of governance is here in the state capital. If I'm out in the district where I don't have a team, I don't have a budget, I just have mindless work to do, I can't be very effective for my people. I have to do these things in an order that makes sense. I have a budget to complete. And I'm like, wait a second, you're sounding like you know what you're doing. So we immediately said this guy was stupid. And you look through all the previous reporting, and I'm like, we are all over this guy. We just got to get out of his way, And they'd write things like, he's former Taliban. Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're in fucking South Central Afghanistan. Everybody there is tied to the Taliban. Who fucking cares? Like, let that go. And he's like, I have a plan for this region. Oh, and I'm going to use your word, manifest destiny. You want to control where you go with your people? What do you want to do? And so I spent a lot of hours with him, and I sketched out, like a lieutenant, I sketched out exactly what the boss was saying, right? And then I transferred it into a PowerPoint. And then I jumbled it all up and brought it back to him and said, here's what I've got. I'm going to communicate this to the Americans. And then my interpreter slowly, without any interference from me, slowly explained what every line was. And again, remember, I jumbled it up. And he's like, you are a fucking idiot, Pete. Look. And he broke out and he's like, move this here, move that there. And he corrected it back to the original form that he'd given me the day before, right? I take that thing to the Americans. And he had said, this is the smartest thing I'd ever heard. And it's really unlocked the whole thing. He's like, there's only room for one sword in the scabbard. And I got to go tell that to an infantry battalion commander. And he's like, but he was a FAO, a foreign area officer of everybody. And he's like, oh, great. What's he want to do? But the brigade was like, he didn't make this PowerPoint. And I'm like, motherfucker, I know. I'm translating this thing for you. And they slowly started to get on board. But this is in 2011,
Yeah.
Like, think about how fucking long it took for us to figure that out. And that didn't become doctrine. It didn't become a thing. And so when we look at that desire to control our destiny, to know what's possible for that person, like, and I'll use an example, and then I'm really going to shut up. When we think about Major League Baseball and how there wasn't integration, but they're all business owners. And so even if they want to put a black player in their team, they don't want to fuck up their business. And so they're like, I don't know how this is going to go. This is high risk for me. So sure, let's have some black players, but let's not get crazy about it because, the market has to move towards us, and they don't know if the market will move. Now it's obvious, and it's like, why didn't you do that 100 years earlier? But they didn't know that. There's for sure some bigotry involved in that. But to change something that dramatically, it's not as easy as we want it to be when you're in that moment.
Right. No, absolutely.
When we look at USAID, a lot of the news is they wasted $50 million on Sesame Street or whatever those things are. One of the things we're missing is that when USAID does stuff, it often is bullshit. I'll go out and they're going to do, we have an initiative to do X. And so what I like to do is go in front of X and go after X and go, okay, this is supposed to create governance. What governance is there right now? No, it's none. It's just all warlords and chaos, right? And they're like, now that we have X complete, well, here comes the governance. And so I go back and I'm like, what is it? Oh, it's all warlords and chaos. And you tell that to the boss and they're like, what the fuck is USAID doing here, right? And so even when it all briefs, I'm going to say this, it all briefs well, but the results are rarely there. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, dude, when I came out with my book, I was on Facebook, which is always an absolute mess. But I started getting these things that would come through about these jobs at the U.S.-Mexico border, and I was like, why the fuck are there private military contractors down at the U.S.-Mexico border? And then I realized after a while, it's because we are using private military contractors instead of ICE agents or anything else to move migrants into the United States of America. And dude, I'll walk you through the entire supply chain. But I remember one of the jobs was like, you get on a big yellow school bus with a bunch of migrant children and you take them to San Diego or LA or San Francisco, and it's $700 a day. And I was like, why are we using PMCs? I thought PMCs were going to die after Afghanistan and Iraq. So,
right.
So I'll take you through this supply chain, man. So an NGO, USA pays for an NGO. They go down to the Mexico side of the border and they start telling everybody how to get through. So this is the problem with USAID is that they're not doing stuff necessarily on behalf of what is going to make a fully functioning government work. They are doing things, and you nailed it. They're doing things that make them feel better, that briefs well, like I got to save X amount of people or help X amount of people.
Right.
But it doesn't actually fit into the larger scheme. So these nonprofits, these NGOs are down there. They tell people, get rid of your passport, get rid of your birth certificate, get rid of everything, right? If you don't have that stuff and you show up to the border, you get to change your name. You get to be whoever you want to be. And that is really, really good if you're going through the US border, because we don't have biometrics data for the people from Venezuela or China or Uzbekistan that are coming through. So you start with a blank slate. Now, if you're a child and you get dropped off at the US-Mexico border, Department of Homeland Security under, ICE takes you in, and they can't do anything with you if you're under the age of 14. Can't fingerprint you. They can't ask you questions, can't ask for ID, can't nothing. This goes all the way back to the Obama kids in cages thing. This is where it changed.
Right.
Within 72 hours of having a child, they have to have you out of their facility. So where are they going to hand these people off to? Well, that's where private military contractors come in. Big one is MVM. They were in Afghanistan doing like they were doing some pretty shady stuff over in Afghanistan. But now these guys grab these kids, take them to an airport. You have a charter jet, and then they fly them somewhere. So you've seen it on YouTube or X or something where they're like, who are you? Who are you with? And the MVM private contractor just flips his ID over because they don't have to tell you anything. They're a private company. They're a private contractor. So now you have kids from the border to a plane. From the plane, let's say to Kentucky, MVM then drops him off to a nonprofit. These are all the Lutheran churches, the Catholic churches that have been getting a ton of cash from USAID under HHS, so Health and Human Services. So you go from DHS to HHS. Now you're seeing it just keeps getting obscured. It gets harder and harder to say, more opacity, right? These contracts under the Office of Refugee Resettlement are tasked with getting these kids to their sponsors. Theoretically, every kid that shows up has to have like a friend or family or somebody in the United States. Well, what smugglers have done is they've realized all this stuff. So they take a kid to the border. They say, hey, here's your sponsor. They get to the end of it under the HHS contract, and they say, hey, this is my sponsor. And they give them a piece of paper. A piece of paper is somebody part of the smuggling ring. And then they get to take them from there. That's where you hear about these kids that they can't find. 340,000 children made it all the way through that process, got dropped off and lost. And the reason behind it is that the smugglers take them on the other side so they can get paid by the families, or if they're not getting paid, they can sell them into workforces, sex trade, drug trade, you name it. So what we've created, and it's through private military contractors, is a way for the U.S. government to subsidize the morality of being a federal agent. Now, whether that's overseas, whether that's in the United States, it allows the obscurity of giving it to a private company to then hand it off to an NGO that then hands it off to who gives a shit, because we're making our money off of these kids. And that's the scary thing of what's happening. And that's kind of the gist of what I've been trying to say for the last year is your tax dollars through USAID or through HHS or through DHS are smuggling kids, and some of them are going into the sex trade. You're sex trafficking children with US tax dollars. And that's what's coming out with USAID and all these other places.
There's a lot in there. And
I know.
If you've worked in the world that we've worked in, because I worked for a PMC before, and all of their buildings and things got bigger in the last 30 years, right? Like they didn't exist, some of them. There was no khaki 40 years ago. Come on. But maybe there was, but a lot of these places were new, and they want to survive, and they have lobby money, and they know that they have to find the next gig. They're just like a commander. It's like, I have to deploy my people. I have to deploy my people. But here's the norm. If you've done this job, and I know you're going to echo this, it doesn't matter if you perform the contract as much as it matters that you put a seat that's billable for that person. So yeah, there's a high bar to get into that seat, but after that, you can put a 0 on the board every day, and that company gets paid. And I sat in one of those seats went out to Kona province, and they're like, hey, you don't have the official machine, nor have you been licensed to use the official machine to talk to these people. And get this, Pete's not allowed by regulation to talk to people, even though like I'm one of the best goddamn collectors in the country at the time. I'm not allowed to do any of these things. I'm like, so I'm supposed to put a 0 on the board every day. They're like, hey, and by the way, our little local counterintelligence team, Army Actual, wasn't there because they were out doing things. And so I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? They're like, just sit tight. And I'm like, sit tight. I didn't come to Kona to watch movies and sit tight. I came here to work, and it didn't matter. And this is a truth about contracting. There's all kinds of great things that they do that work well, and God bless, do all those things. But if I went there and I sat there for a year, I could have charged, I don't know, 170 grand to sit there and do nothing, and no one would have given a fuck. The other thing they said to me was, why don't you run one-time sources? And I'm like, oh, see, I'm a better collector than you, so I'm going to ask you this question. What's a one-time source? And this Marine, former Marine guy, Intel guy's like, well, if you don't know what I know what a one-time source is. I want to know if you know, because when you say that, I now have to ask you if you know what the fuck you're talking about. Because one, I'm not even in the Army in this case. You're telling me, a civilian, I should be running one-time sources, and you don't immediately know what the right-left limits are? At least you weren't willing to say it? Nah, I'm not getting involved in that game. And they didn't care anyhow. They wanted me to wear their shirt, show up to work, and sit in that chair. So when we talk about all of these contract things, that's a universal truth. Sorry for sneezing, everybody. That was a universal truth. It was just sit in the chair and be billable. That is your job.
Well, let's just break it down, since it's the break it down show, right? Walmart gets contractors every year around Christmas. And the reason is because they need an influx of employees. They don't have the time to train them all just for a 3 to 4 month period. And what it allows them to do is to get people at the checkout counter, get more merchandise out. And then when Christmas is over, it allows them to let go of those individuals. That's spectacular. That's how it's supposed to be. That's the same way that contracting started in Iraq. And it started really, I don't want to say that we were the first, but Blackwater was really the first one that started doing like combat type missions, military type missions over in Iraq. They protected Paul Bremer, then the State Department. Right. So what should happen is you have contractors come in, and then at some point you say, oh, I need them permanently, and I start training my own people because these are jobs. The US government realized, I think pretty quickly, somewhere around 05, 06, we don't want to train our own guys. There's no reason for us to train our own guys because we can have these contractors, and it's a line item. Nobody even notices in the budget. And we can have these guys do it all the time, all day, every day. That's why you have 13 hours over in Libya. That's why you have the Nisr Square stuff in Iraq. That's why you had the Blackwater guys get hanged off the bridge in 2004. So the US government has made a conscious decision not to hire and train their own employees, which puts those employees under direct regulation of that, right? A Border Patrol agent has direct regulations. A U.S. military member has the UCMJ. A private military contractor doesn't have that stuff. They can be hired and fired on demand, but they don't have the morality of being, under the regulations of that. So when the U.S. border thing kicked off and got crazy, and look, dude, this happened under Obama. This happened under Trump. This happened under Biden, big time under Biden. Let's call a spade a spade. Instead of hiring more DHS, hiring more ICE agents, they said, what we'll do? We'll throw some money at that. Let's get some contractors over there. And it has grown and grown and grown. Here's another one. In Haiti, how do you get the Haitians from Haiti into the United States? And dude, somewhere in my head, I was like, man, these boats must be going into Florida every day and they're just getting these guys up. No, dude. Yeah. What they've done is they've put in a private military contractor in Haiti. That's Constellas. Triple Canopy, Constellas, they're all kind of the Blackwater, the remnants of Blackwater. The Haitians go up to their little base and say, hey, by the way, I put my thing in this app. I'm applying for asylum. They fly them to Guantanamo Bay. Literally the place where we have like the worst terrorists in the world. They fly them there. They screen them at Guantanamo Bay through Triple Canopy or NVM. It just depends on who has the contract. And then once they're done with screening, they fly them into the United States. And who do they hand them off to?
I have something to say about all this.
They hand them off to a nonprofit that is under HHS. That like, so not only have we used contractors to, flex labor towards something that's a problem, we've actually used contractors to create more of a problem. And look, whether the Haitians are eating dogs and cats, I have no idea. But the fact that we have facilitated that entire process through contracting is shocking.
Yeah. All right. So at any point in this chain, you can zoom in on what is going on operationally, tactically, especially, and go, what the fuck? So the guy who's going to do the screening is a dude like me. And they're going to sit there and then be like, hey, you're going to have to knock out 3 to 4 screenings in a day. Maybe we'll ramp up capacity and get you to 6, but you have to work 12 plus hours to do that. Right. And so now you can see the line. There's a virtual line. Like I can do 6 a day. It means I can do 600 every, 100 days. But you know what? I got to go on leave every 90 days. So, like the line becomes this ponderous machine of like, done. Oh yeah, I sit down and some guy who's got a tenth of my experience is going to teach me how to screen. Even though I've done screening 100 times, I've got screening covered. Just show me how your system works and I'll take care. Well, you're going to have to wait a week before we license you to screen around here. Just walk in. Like, fine. So we sit there and then I do one and they're like, oh, you know how to screen. I'm like, yeah, I know how to screen. And then they'll call it vetting or screening or whatever else. I don't know. This guy says his name's Mohammed, right? Whatever the name is going to be. I put him in the machine. Took it. Null value. I guess he's a saint. I don't fucking know. And then in one session, and remember, I'm on a timeline. I got to get 6 of these things out in a 12-hour day. Maybe really just 3 or 4. I've got to divine something about this dude. I've got to have a conversation. I will talk to them about as long as I've talked to you in this episode, right? And then a lot of the questions are you now? Or have you ever been a terrorist? No? Okay, I'll write down no. Are you now? Or are you planning to become a terrorist? No? Okay, I'll write down no. And so like a third of the questions are just idiotic, like they don't even do anything. So when you talk about this, if you're going to put them in Guantanamo, you have to feed and house them. You need contractors for that. If you're going to screen them, you got to have screeners. You got to have a team that runs that. So I'll say all this and then I'll move on. I went down to the border back when Vice President Harris wouldn't do it. I went down to Del Rio, Texas, and I talked to the judge who handles all of their response. And because I know how these things work, right? And when you zoom in, you will continue to see problems. So when we're talking about Sesame Street and $50 million, yeah, that sucks. But when you realize that judge, and I say to him, how many different interpreters do you have to have hired at a moment's notice? I mean, where are they going to come from? Because we're way out in West Texas. So either you got to pay them to live there, and there's no hotel space for all these people. There's just too many people. Or you got to flex them in 6 hours away from San Antonio. Oh, shit, we got a guy from whatever country. Yeah, let's get a hold of Dave and see if he'll come down here and translate for this guy. I mean, all of this. And then, by the way, you have to operate within a 72-hour window. It becomes insanity to not have all this provisioned. And like you said, if you're not going to build your own capacity, we had cooks standing guard. But you're a cook. Oh, well, we have contractors doing cooking for us. Okay, so what do? Yeah, I stand guard. That's what I do all day. And so all of these, I'm giving everybody this example so you can understand that at any point in the process, you can zoom in and see even more waste and just bad management. But to cover all of these points of waste and management with somebody who's making sure they don't do that creates more waste and more opportunities for corruption and more cost.
Well, and it's so obscured that it's hard to track, right? And I've put hours and hours and hours into looking at this. Like the NGOs south of the border, there's one called No More Deaths. Look, they're getting funding from USAID and private donors, and that's fine. And they feel really good because they're giving watering stations to these people. But written inside the tents, they say, hey, by the way, there's guards over here. They're not over here. Like they're facilitating people getting in to the United States, which isn't really helping, the whole, we have a border strategy. And then you get to the Border Patrol guys whose hands are tied. Then you give them to, if you zoom in on any single part of that, you would look at it and say, this is insane, because these guys are telling them, don't give your identification, make up a new name, and then they go to a guy like you and you say, what's your name? And there's nothing in the database and you have to ask stupid questions, and then they just release them in. Like
Right.
this is
Yeah.
unless this guy was like a legitimate bad guy and they have DNA or they have fingerprints or biometric stuff on it,
right.
you're not going to know that it's the trans aguware or whatever, the gang members, right? How are you going to track that? It's not like these guys are coming in with a birth certificate that's got a stamp that says, hey, drug dealer, raper.
Yeah.
Like,
and ultimately, what do I care, right? Like, I'm just a dude in a process. And if I say no to too many of them, that's going to red flag me. Why are you saying no to all these guys? He's with Al Qaeda. I detected Al Qaeda. Like, you know what? You got to go home. Yeah. It is insanity to look at these problems and try to. It's all about the policy. And if Congress isn't going to improve $1 trillion, whatever it takes to do this, and even then, there's going to be waste in this thing because we just don't have the capacity to handle this many people. And that's having them come through the gate. And then they get inside and it's like, oh, do you need more court access? Because you just added 800 new cases that weren't predicted for this court on their dockets, criminal or otherwise. It's that all costs more time and money, and continues to gum the system up. You're never going to make a big government like ours very efficient. You can always pull things out, but it's just going to get gummed up again, though, isn't it?
I mean, at some point it will. The problem is that when you outsource all this stuff, you lose that coverage, right? You lose the ability to like command and control it, lines of communication, whatever you want to call it, from the military days. So when you put a contractor in there, who is watching over the contractor? Well, now you have to have a contractor that's watching over the contractor. And look, dude, all this started in Iraq in 2004, and it started under Donald Rumsfeld because he was like, I can make the military more efficient. We shouldn't have cooks cooking. We can outsource that for cheaper.
Right.
We shouldn't have, and it slowly becomes something where now you have more civilian contractors on the ground than you do soldiers. Okay. Gaza. We just set up a checkpoint in Gaza. I have no idea who's paying for it, dude. They've obscured that so much. It's under a company called UG Solutions. They are going over there as private military contractors, and they're searching vehicles that are coming into Gaza. Now,
right.
This is my big concern. If you have these guys and something happens, God forbid, how is the U.S. going to act and react to that? Because you have U.S. citizens overseas that are still U.S. citizens. And dude, we've shown over and over again, if you have a U.S. citizen get hurt or maimed, like there are military repercussions for that, right? You saw it in 2004 after the Blackwater guys got hanged off the bridge. We sent the Marines into Fallujah, not once, twice. You have the Nisser Square stuff where they ended up getting kicked out of Iraq. You have the 13 hours thing where you had 2 civilians die. And then what did we do in Libya after that? Like civilians on the battlefield can change your foreign and military policy.
Right.
So is the answer really, let's put more U.S. civilians into harm's way and then say, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. I guess we better go in and give Israel the Moabs, or like you're seeing it in Ukraine. You see these Americans that are on the front lines, these Australians, those are all private military contractors funded by your tax money that goes to Ukraine or whatever. But when a few of those guys get smoked, what's going to happen? Is there's going to be an outcry, and they're going to say, Trump, get in there and do something, and it's going to escalate. So if you want to talk about how we're going to get into World War III, it's through outsourcing these stupid fucking jobs that we probably shouldn't have our people doing anyway.
In the
getting
first
them
place,
too close to the front line, something happens, and then it just starts escalating.
Yeah. And now times that by every country on the planet. I joke about this, but only kind of, sort of. There's a couple of things. Like, all generals I know now are over their careers. None of them are in jail. All of these other companies that have people that go do things abroad, they're not in jail. All these fuck ups, all this misappropriation, all these things that are bad, like nobody's in jail. There's no penalty for any of this. It's just, did you make, no, look, if you're a low level guy, okay, sure, that guy might go to jail. If you're PFC Manning. So when you were there with PFC, so was I, right? And my office was not even 100 linear feet. And granted, you got to go around a wall and into a door. Maybe it takes 30 seconds to walk there, but it's right there. And if PFC Manning had said, Pete, you're a collector, you have some things, but you're a civilian, I want to bend your ear. What do I do about this thing? I don't know what I would have said to them, right? And I'm saying him because at the time he was a him. And by the way, Peter Van Buren was in the office 2 doors down from me. He said the same thing. It's like, I don't know what I would have said to that dude. And if I would have said, well, go to the IG, I couldn't, because when I was in Bosnia, I was getting no paid, but the Army wasn't paying me, everybody. It was called the no paid due. And I put an IG complaint, and they're like, yeah, what's going on? I'm like, they think I'm a divorced Mexican lady. Legitimately. This is what the reason why there was some kind of snafu with the numbers. And so I became a divorced Mexican lady. And so they realized that I wasn't that, and they started paying me again. And I went to the IG, and I'm like, how did this happen to me? Who else is getting fucked like this? And so the IG came back and like, there's nothing wrong. As far as we know, you're a divorced Mexican lady. And so how am I ever going to say, you know what you need to do, PFC Manning? You need to go to the Inspector General. Not a fucking chance I would say that, right? And so we have these, when you get down to the ground level, you have these things like the State Department shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. The USAID shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. A lot of these units shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. And so you get all these negative values, and you're going to get mad at Manning, but not put a general in jail for not prepping their troops and spending money on all these contracts. And by the way, here's what is great about contractors is we've got a $140 million line item for screening in whatever, Bosnia, whatever you're going to do. And the good news is 51% of that contract has to be given out to subcontractors, and most of those are going to be lady-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned, or those kind of things, right? And so, like, how are we going to say no to that?
Yeah, dude, it's all a way of just obscuring what is actually happening on the ground, and right. We did it really, really well in Iraq, because every time I came home, and they were like, "We are winning the shit out of that war," and I was like, We couldn't even get the toilets into the police station without them being stolen every day. But right. If you obscure it, then it takes like a serious audit for somebody to go in and say, what the heck is happening? Which is what you're seeing now. And God bless them, because at the end of the day, there are enough people that have learned how to play the game that get paid out from this, that you really have to have somebody that either there was in the like on the ground that says, holy crap, this is what I saw. Right. Or you have to audit it. How many times you were in the military? How many times did you in September go and do Spindex? So if you have never heard of Spindex, it's where you go out with all your ammunition that you were supposed to shoot throughout the year, and you shoot it all in September, because the fiscal year starts October 1st. So you go out to the range and you expend 20 to 30,000 rounds. Dude, I shot so much that like both of my shoulders were bruised. I was shooting left-handed because my right shoulder hurt so bad. And then once September ends, then you go and you say, hey, I had 30,000 rounds last year. I shot all of them. Now I need 33,000 rounds. Yeah. And then it just goes on by 10% every single year. And dude, I wish somebody would just like pull a PFC, or dude, I think what you do is you grab a lieutenant or like a really young captain that's getting ready to get out and say, what's fucked up? And since the captain's getting out, like, dude, I would tell everybody, I'd be like, dude, this is dicked up. Every general should have a guy like me that's sitting there going, no, this isn't working. This is stupid. Or our
policy. Our policy is so tied to budget. You're right about all these things. When I was in the regular Army, we had a guy that got arrested in the PX, the military store, people. And he had stolen a shirt. And this guy was going to have a clearance and everything else. And so we had to get through his entire legal case before we could even recomplete his security clearance process. So this guy's going to be here probably for his whole enlistment almost, right? Because he had gone through, education, for military language training, and now he'd gone through his AIT, and he couldn't complete that because of his. So this is this ponderous problem that the commander hated, because it's this person is just stuck in the system. And they said, all right, you stole something. We're going to give you an Article 15 and chapter you out of the Army. And he's like, but I didn't do it. And like, we have you on video. And he's like, but I didn't do it. And so they're like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, we're going to go to court. And so we went to court. And at some point, we got to the end of the year. We were out of toilet paper at the battalion level, please bring in toilet paper from your house. We're not supposed to do this. Don't tell anybody, but we're out of money. We're out of toilet paper. We got, our battalion was brigade size because it's a training battalion. And this guy is like, so he appealed to Circle 15 up to the brigade level, which is everybody's right. And then he's like, no, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go to court. So we went to court and they weren't sure what to do. And our battalion commander was like, I hope the fucking God he wins. I don't care if he stole it anymore. We can't afford, we don't have a jail. So if he's got to go to jail, we got to contract that shit out, right? And so the commander's like, we can't afford toilet paper, or we can't afford to have whatever the guy's name is. We'll say Turner, so it's not anybody else's name but mine. We can't afford to have Turner go to jail. It would cost us, however much a day. And we were in such a quandary that, thank God, that guy won. It would have been horrible. We had no idea how to. That's how tied to budget we are, right? It was all budget related. When our government changes to this side or that side, doesn't matter which side it is, we change our foreign policy. And so the lieutenant colonel who ran around Iraq going, I'm building schools, and he's just whipping out money left and right, whipping out money. The next year, when the next commander comes in, he's like, we don't build schools. What are you talking about? Who told you we were building school? And it's just like this chaotic mess that on the ground level, you're like, how do you manage this? How do you study this? How do you get better at it? If our ideas just change so dramatically. No, it's not schools. It's all small business loans. Well, where are all the small business from the last round of small business loans? Don't care about that. You know what I'm doing? I'm handing out money for small business loans. Who wants money?
Dude, so I'll give you a ground level one. When you're like a captain, a company commander, they give you like a $5,000 spending limit to go get coins. Now you get your own coins and they say your name is on it. And then you get to hand out those coins to make people feel really special and shit, which I think is stupid. Look, if you want to have coins, you should pay for those things out of your pocket, like, because it's only building your ego when you're giving it off to somebody, right?
Sure.
So every company commander, every first sergeant, everything gets to have these coins made, $10,000, dude. Extrapolate that all the way, to the highest ranks of the military, and you're spending a whole lot of money on something that is a coin that is literally, dude, I don't even know where any of my coins are that I got given. I don't give a shit. But same thing, dude. When you become a general, your staff is approximately 200 people, 250 people that are all on the payroll. You're getting your own plane. So it's not necessarily that you have too many people or that you have so much waste. It's that you've created this cocoon of waste around each one of these ranks, right? Do you need 200 people? If you're a 4-star general, do you need 250 people that are essentially assisting you on a day-to-day basis? You freaking don't. That doesn't count their command structure. They could also be generals that also have their own people, right? That's just to help the general, 250 people. And we got 44 4-star generals right now with 250 people on their staff. Dude, President Trump doesn't have 250 people on his staff. This is what it only takes that one person, that one general to say, you know what, I got 250. I need one more person that can go clean up dog crap. And now they have 251. Oh, I need somebody that'll actually like check on my bidet every morning to make sure it's squirting water at the right spot at my butthole. Now you have 252. And dude, that's how it started, right? You have your brigade commander has his staff element. And then once you get past that, it's like, well, now you get all your own staff plus your staff element. Like it just, it's
and even the staff guy has staff.
Yeah. Like, dude, it's a Leviathan. It's eating itself so large that it's going to consume everything around it.
It is this big gigantic machine, and so like good to go trim it, right? But be ready, because when you trim this thing, it's not going to function as well. I mean, look, if you have a problem at X, good luck finding somebody who can help you fix your problem. We're talking simple problems like, hey, I need the email address for that old account so I can actually use it. Can you guys help me sort that? Yeah, we'll have someone call you. But then no one's going to call me from X, right? And so when these tech folks want to just reap people out of a system and have machines replace some of those functions, that don't work either. So let's just be clear on this. There's going to be some pain from all of this accounting and firing and letting go of people. That's fine. We have pain of the money going out the door, but none of this is going to be pain free. It's going to cost something. And so when we look at USAID and we get mad at a political party, don't do that, because it's everybody. At any time, Congress could have said, I want to hire a IG to go in and run through USAID because we went to Iraq and we went to Afghanistan, and these guys fucked up. I got emails from Pete. I got emails from Morgan. I got emails from all these guys on the ground saying every time they saw USAID on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was fucked up. Well, if that's true, and so instead you'll have someone from USAID, if they bother to show up, and they'll sit there and Josh Hawley will be like, I've got legalese and I'm pointing my finger at you, mister. Hope I get reelected. And that's it, right? Like nothing ever happens. And I'm picking on Josh Hawley. Pick on any of them.
I will say that you might have some short-term pain, but you're also going to get to a point where people can be self-sufficient on their own. That general can probably book his own Southwest flight. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to be a dick, right. But like, dude, I work in corporate America, and you can always kind of tell when somebody makes it when they have an admin or an assistant, right? It's helping them. It's helping them book their flights, or they're helping but at the end of the day, that's because they have this prestige of that. And it's one admin, or you have one admin spread across 2-3 VPs. The military has taken that and been like, we need 250 admins for one VP that is essentially, a 1-star general that's in charge of X amount of troops. That's not any different than a corporate CEO that's in charge of X amount of people. And there are a lot of efficiencies. I think the businesses that you see that are making good money, and I'm not talking about like S&P or any of that stuff, small business owners, they have figured out how to automate some of the process to make it more efficient. If you're out there and you are building houses, they don't drop off a bunch of 2x4s anymore. They drop off prefabricated walls. So all you have to do is put the wall up. There's a lot of ways, dude, that's completely different from when I was a kid, doing construction. It doesn't make the house any different. It doesn't make it any better or any worse. It just makes it more efficient so that you can build it faster and cheaper. Theoretically, you sell it cheaper, but that's not really the case.
Right. We saw this the last time President Trump was president. He basically said to Mattis, I think it was, like, bring your unit to attention and do an accountability formation. Time now. And it was like, contractors. If you were a lieutenant and you did all that hemming and hawing, the next word you would hear out of the commander's mouth would be, you're relieved. And that'd be it, because you didn't know where your fucking people were, right? And if you're so big, so ponderous, you can't gain account. Look, I get it. It's an entire military force and there's contractors. Okay, great. How much time do you need? Do you need 10 days? Do you need 5 days? Do you need 5 hours? How much time do you need? Because if you can't tell me where everybody is, which countries we are in, I get a big, I don't know. That is, you're fired. Go away. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Brown. Hey, General Brown, bring your unit to attention. Have them sound off. I need accountability. I need to know where everybody is. And now, as we say in the military, lottie-dottie, everybody. And then do that. And if you can't do that in 10 days, you're fired. Pretty simple. And then all of a sudden you realize how fat your organization is when you can't even tell me that, Pete's at Longstool because he broke his leg. You don't know where anybody is. You can't put your finger on the contract company and be like, I need a head count for everybody. I need it in 2 hours and hurry up. Let's go. We have too many people around if you can't keep track of them.
No, that's true. And what most businesses do is they put in something called shrinkage. They essentially say, look, we know we're going to lose 5 to 10%, whether it's based off of theft or whether it's based off of, you have a pallet and it breaks a piece of concrete, whatever it is, you have some kind of shrinkage.
Right.
The military has no concept of this. And I think that if you looked at what they have for shrinkage, just with Spendex and all these other stupid things, I would bet you're at 50, 60%. Okay, I'm going to say something that's really unpopular.
Ooh, right.
Yeah. The military is the closest thing to socialism that has worked ever. You go in, you're guaranteed a paycheck, you have a uniform, everything's paid for, you're going to gain rank at a certain time and place. And it is socialism. Like, this is where you eat. This is where you go stand and you salute. I mean, it is socialism as close as it can be. And everybody from the military thinks like, oh my God, it is like the patriotic thing. And we're all God-fearing Americans and our freedom. But if you take a look at it, like it really is pretty goddamn close to socialism. Like you're gonna get out as an
sure.
E6, E7, E8. Like it's not right place, right time, right uniform. Hey, you need bullets? Guess what? Sign 3 pieces of paper. Here's your bullets. Like
Yeah.
literally, it is socialism. And I'm sure all the military people just like turn this off. They're like, that guy's fucking insane. But
yeah. You can simultaneously shoot less than 2,000 rounds in your military career, even though you're in somewhere adjacent to a combat type thing. I'm not talking about clerks. And then also have a guy that's like, I shot 10,000 rounds of ammo today, because there's simultaneously not enough ammo and too much ammo.
yeah.
It's just crazy. Like, it's amazing to me. Anybody can hit anything in the U.S. military, and we shoot the most. Like, no, we don't. Okay, maybe we shoot the most, but we shoot the most ammo. We don't have the most people shooting the most ammo. It's all over. And I'm not talking about like people who go outside the wire who get to shoot more. Even they don't get to shoot enough. And then in right scenarios. Another thing that's weird too is, so I taught a course called CIFSO, the Counterintelligence Force Protection Source Operation course. Pretty high end course, right? You learned how to do source operations. Didn't make you like a source handler of the highest order, because that's really more CIA, FBI kind of business. But still, like, you learned the basics of how to go to a foreign country, develop a source, process everything, and then run them, right? And so we did this in Arizona, and so we had to have cars because you have to have source meets. I can't just go drive everywhere in my personal car. That's government business. So I've got to have a car. That car's got to be maintained. Oh, and by the way, the students now need cars because they can't drive around in their rental cars either. And you also got to manage all the shrinkage that goes into this thing, right? And so we got to go into Tombstone. Can't go into Bisbee because they hate the Army. So we go into Tombstone and we do source ops there. None of this stuff's classified. This is all just open stuff. We constantly had to fight for the existence of our course because no one understood why we needed it, right? Here we are about to ramp up to go to the biggest military movement we've had in 50 years. And we don't have nearly enough people trained in source operations. Talk about shrinkage. They all deploy. They started doing like these people who are instant CI agents, instant human people, because they didn't have enough people. And I'm doing this with my hands, like pump, but I'm pumping them through. And they killed that course off. You had to always fight. We had to fight for we'd get bounced around from flag to flag. So like, you're in this battalion. Now you're in this, we're going to jump you to this brigade. They didn't know where to even put us, because we weren't that expensive either. And we could only graduate. It's very labor intensive. Like the course load's like 1 instructor to 3 to 4 students, because it's a very personal thing. And that course died because someone didn't have enough weight with some commander who wrote some check. And so we had fewer people who knew how to run sources ultimately going into big gigantic war. Like they should have plussed it up, not gone the other way. Like, before you graduate from AIT, 10% of you are going to go through this, whatever it is, right? If it was Ranger School, that would never happen, because Ranger School is hyper important. Although, how much rangering does anybody do in the military? It's just a weird thing, man.
Don't use the example of Ranger School. Use the example of airborne. When's the
last
time
for sure, airborne. You're right. That's better.
Airborne, yeah. Like, dude, we had the 173rd jump into northern Iraq. It was the most secure place on the planet, right? Erbil,
right?
But like, it's literally, you have all these people going through airborne that will never actually use it, and then you fight for other stuff, dude. And I'm not sitting here saying I know the right answer or get rid of airborne completely. Same. But it is, anytime you're getting to a point that you're contracting stuff out, especially around the military or law enforcement, you're starting to run into this legal gray area, and you need to take a step back and say, are we so efficient that we have to have contractors? Are we Walmart around Christmas? Or are we so inefficient that we're going to try to bring contractors in to bring us into efficiency, which would never happen? But yeah.
It's a crazy thing. And so we're talking about USAID. We can do this with Treasury. Wait until people realize how many intelligence organizations are in the departments, because Department of Energy, not just counterintelligence, there's a lot of intelligence involved, and those guys probably need more help. Like, this is an area where, like, this is such a threat for us. We don't have our hands wrapped around it, but how do you get more money there? Well, we got to spend all these, it's not hard to find $1 trillion. I know everybody thinks $1 trillion like is impossible, but when we regularly lose $1 billion, you only have to do that a few hundred times, and all of a sudden, like, just with Buddy, you're like, holy shit, we wasted $55 million in this one program. You know, I'm already quite a long ways towards $1 trillion. They're going to find way more than $1 trillion if every department is run in a similar fashion.
Yeah, but if you ask a brigade commander to secure a base and you tell him you'll give him one person for every 10 feet of fence line, he's going to say, I need 2 people for every 10 feet. Actually, I need enough people where they can stand shoulder to shoulder. Like, dude, it's innate to be like you want this to be the most secured. Yeah, exactly.
In 3.
So
and guys got to go on leave.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to talk crap, because there are places where it would make sense to plus stuff up, but there's also a lot of places where you're way too plussed up to like, dude, do you need a whole military police brigade at JBLM to do local law enforcement on the base?
Right.
You probably don't. You have them there in case you need them somewhere else, but then you also have military police brigades everywhere else. So it's very, dude, like I said, I don't know what the right answer is, but I know that we just can't keep spending money like we're drunken sailors and then be like, what do you mean we've still lost all of these wars?
Yeah. Do you got time for one more real quick thing?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I always say I don't know any. I really don't know any. I don't know any Americans that are anti-immigrant, right? We tend to put people in this box of like, they hate immigrants. Like, I just don't know that those people exist. My favorite immigrant or American is the next one. Like, I love all this stuff. I do want to keep people who are in other people's prisons, for the most part, out of our country. I do want to make sure that kids are protected. I do want to make sure that we bring in enough people that we have the capacity to actually help them and get them through the process. Maybe even get them a little bit of a jump start. Because, you know, I've got a guy coming up on the show. He was a Chinese immigrant, and his family was horrible to him. So he's like, I'm out. I'm going to live on the streets. And then he went into the Chinese gangs. He was in a Tong. And then he became the leader of the Tong. And he's not even like 20 years old, right? I don't want more of that. I want to take as much of the inhumanity out of that process. But I don't know how many people come in. I don't know how many people it takes to manage that process. And I also don't want it to be that as soon as we get it out of HHS's hands, the better. And then let's get it into, you know, HH whatever and HH this and HH whatever thing along the chain. I don't want to make it that it's fast, just get them out of the way procedurally. Like, how do you properly walk someone through? And if the critical path to get someone from refugee to in the States and accounted for and like in a sane way provided for, if that is 8 months, then okay, how many can we take? We can only do about 1 million a year, or whatever that number is. I would love to understand what that process is, but you can't get a fucking square answer out of anybody.
No, and to be honest with you, a lot of them are just playing the long game, right? I'm not anti-immigration. At the end of the day, if you're doing immigration right, these people come in, they pay for taxes, they pay their taxes, they do all the things that you do as a U.S. citizen.
Right.
When you're not doing it right, they all come in and you start seeing it stress, because people talk about the money. Here's what you don't see is that, like, I live in Arizona. Every time you go down to like St. Jude's Food Bank, the line is like 3 miles long. It stresses not only the people that are like trying to help migrants, like that are getting funded, but it's also stressing the things that are built within the community to try to help those within the community that are having a hard time. And dude, I grew up on government cheese. I was the guy that was standing in a welfare line. We had food stamps. I get it, dude. Like, getting that hand up is spectacular. But when you stress, you're not just stressing HHS and DHS and all these things. You are stressing the local communities to a point that they can no longer help the people that are here that are, you know, trying to get help. Now, here's my other concern with mass immigration. First off, you're going to need migration because we're just not having babies. Dude, I had 2 kids. My mom had 4. My grandma had like 17. I don't know. But when you like bring in that many individuals, you just run the risk of them coming in and thinking that they're going to get something and they don't, and they get frustrated. And what do? Right? Remember that movie, like Five Goes West, the Disney movie where the mice are like, there are no cats in America and the streets are paved with cheese. Yeah. Look, a lot of people are coming up here thinking America is going to give them this social net, and they're going to be able to come in and get jobs and all this other stuff, and they won't. And those people get frustrated. Same thing you saw the people in Afghanistan and Iraq get frustrated. Big America is going to come and make everything better, and then we don't. What do? They flip over and start hanging out with the Taliban. So I think it's just a very difficult balance that we have to have. Yeah. The migrants are playing the long game. They know they can. The NGOs tell them, if you're here for 2 years, 3 years, you have a family, those kids are US citizens because they were born here, the chance of you getting booted out is a lot harder. So I think we have to look at it and say, what can we do to stop the spigot in the beginning, and then make it to where you can't just wait it out. Possession's 9/10 of the law, right? If you're in the United States and you have US citizen children, are they really going to boot you out? Maybe. But they're probably going to boot out the guy that just showed up 2 days earlier.
Yeah, right. The one more final thing for me on all of this stuff is there appears to be, and I'm going to put this on the left because this seems to come from them, from my experience working on Iraq and Afghanistan. There is this belief that you can take a farmer without knowing fuck all about farming, or a farmer, that you can take a farmer and improve their bounties so much that they have to hire migrant workers to come in and reap that harvest. Here's what the Iraqi farmers and the Afghan farmers told me about that. There's no crop so big that me and my family can't bring it in. Okay. All right. Everywhere. And this is like province, district, province. Everywhere I went, they all said the same thing. We're not going to hire Iranians to come in and bring in our crop. I'm just going to get my cousin, and we're just going to work a little longer. We're not going to pay someone from out of town to do this shit. But that was a common thing. State Department, USAID, all these people promoted this thing. And so when people in our country say to us, who's going to pick your food? Well, show me a farmer that can't bring in a crop, and I'll worry about that then. That's a bullshit reason, I think, to say that we need immigrants, is so that we can create a lower tier, a lower class of people. How shitty is that to say, oh, well, we need migrants to pick our food? No. Go talk to the farmer and ask them what they need. And you know what they're not going to say? Migrants. They're going to say seed and feed, or how about, here's one thing they're going to say. And leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
True. And a combine.
A combine. Yeah. Well, maybe, but we always want to, here's a co-op tractor. So you guys, the 50 of you can share a tractor, and they're like that. No thanks.
Yeah.
We got it covered, but we always want to assign to farmers what they need. Meanwhile, here's Victor. You want to understand what Victor Davis Hanson has to say about farming. He is a farmer, and he's not like, man, I wish I had some migrants. He's like, there's Mexicans all around me. What are you guys talking about? There's all these people. They're making a lot of money. They're doing well. Here's what we need. And maybe it's water, maybe whatever it is. But when I hear those things, this is the same kind of these tropes that people say because it briefs well. It makes you go, yeah, who would pick our lettuce? Fucking people would pick the lettuce. Or some computer guy will find a robot and be like, beep, cut lettuce, or whatever, like they've done with everything else.
No, I agree. I mean, that's what I'm saying about automation, is that you can automate quite a bit of stuff if you have to. I mean, hell, they can automate the robot to bring your McDonald's out to you. You can automate some of this stuff, and I think that's what will ultimately end up happening. So,
yeah. Well, it's been awesome, man. Anything else you want to say? Everybody should buy the book. It's down there below. You and I are going to get together and talk about the book. I don't know, probably sometime in the next 30 days or so. But anything else you want to say? And I appreciate you coming on and talking about this. We've wandered around this topic a lot, but I think we've hit some really incredible points, all based on experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you want that ground perspective that you and I have been talking about, that's the book. It's not, it's not the general talk. It's not Eric Prince talking about how great Blackwater was. It's Guns, Girls, and Greed. It's got the audio out too, but it is on the ground and what dudes do and how they act without adult supervision. So it's kind of like I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, as a combat story, which is I don't know. I don't know if America's ready to start joking about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan yet, but I sure as fuck am, and that's why I wrote this book.
Fair enough. All right, everybody. This is Morgan. Check out all his stuff. He's an awesome dude. Morgan, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm going to wrap this thing up right now. Everybody, I'll see you. Actually, I'll see you in a couple hours. We're going to do another show today. Bye-bye.
Bye.